Hey everyone, Andrew here from Go Green Compost, and it's been a while since I put out a video, so I wanted to make this one just to say hi, check in with all of you, and share with you a little project I have going on today to kick off the spring, because spring is here. The weather is beautiful here in North Florida, and we've got some new things planted in the garden, and also the perennials around the yard are all waking up. The fruit trees, the bushes, everything is beginning to grow in a very big way. And so a great way to kick off the spring, I think, is by making some compost tea. Specifically, if you are doing organic gardening like I am, we don't use any chemical inputs or fertilizers or insecticides or anything like that. And so when you're doing that, when you're doing organic gardening, having biologically active soil is very important, because you can add all the fish emulsion and organic fertilizer, food scrap, compost, all that stuff you want to your garden and to your trees and to your plants. But if you don't have the microorganisms in the soil that digest that stuff and create a nutrient cycle that allows the plants to absorb it, you're kind of just spinning your wheels. And compost tea is one of the best ways to boost the biological activity in your soil. So to get started today, that's a very simple process. I've got a bucket here, and kind of hard to see with the lighting, but what's in the bottom here is some worm castings from one of my worm bins. And here in my hand, I've got a nice scoop of soil from an area in my yard where I've been spreading wood chips for years now, and that area gets a lot of shade. It's kind of humid, and so if you look, you can actually see that this soil has got a lot of these little white thread-like mycelium going throughout it, and so this is going to add some additional fungal component to my compost tea. So I'm just going to dump that in there. Now, to get started, first ingredient aside from the compost in our tea is just some water, and ideally rainwater really makes the best option. No chlorine, nothing like that. If all you have is city water that's been chlorinated, you want to get rid of that, because the chlorine will degrade some of the biological activity in your tea. So if all you have is city water, you can take a bucket of that and let it sit out in the sun for a day or two. If you aerate it while that's happening, that will really help reduce the level of chlorine in there. But if you've got rainwater, that's best. Now, I've got a rainwater catchment system here, so let's fill this bucket up. And now we're ready to go to the next step. Okay, so I have got my bucket with leaf litter and worm castings, and what I've done is I've hooked up a fish tank aerator here, which is going to bubble some water through that bucket. And that's very important, because we don't want to be creating anaerobic bacteria, the oxygen-hating bacteria, because that's the stuff that's going to stink. It's not good for the plants. What we want is aerobic bacteria. So the more air we can get bubbling through this tea, the better. So the bigger an aerator you have, the better that's going to work. And then also, I've got about a tablespoon of molasses here dissolved in some warm water. And I'm sorry about the wind chime. I didn't realize how loud that was until I started recording, but whatever, it's a nice background sound. So the molasses here is going to provide a nice substrate for the microorganisms in the tea. And so we're just going to dump that in. And contrary to what you may hear, molasses is a fine substrate for both fungi and bacteria. A lot of people seem to be under the impression that because it's sugary and a simple carbohydrate, that bacteria prefer it, but it does help with fungal growth as well. And you can nerd out quite a bit on what you put into your compost tea. You can make a bacteria dominant tea, you can make a fungal dominant tea, and different plants are going to like different things. If you have perennials, trees and shrubs, those will probably prefer a slightly more fungal dominant tea. That's going to lead to a more acidic soil pH, something that is more akin to a forest, something that perennials will like. If you're doing it for your annual garden beds, probably a bacterially dominant tea with simple sugars like the molasses is going to be preferable. And again, you can nerd out all you want on the different types of tea and the ingredients that you put in there, but I think that the most important thing is just to be consistent with it. If you're not sure what kind of tea to make, try a few different formulations and apply them regularly to your garden, because that is going to lead to a more biologically active soil than infrequently applying the perfect formulation of tea. And if you are an organic gardener, compost tea is probably one of the best things you can do for improving the quality of your soil, improving the nutrient cycling, and making organic nutrients more available to your plants. That's why I think it's a great way to kick off the spring when you're going to have a lot of new growth in your garden. And what I'll do with this tea is I'll let it brew here for a day or two. It's pretty warm out right now. In cooler temperatures, you might need to let it brew a little longer because the microorganisms will take longer to procreate. But in this weather, it's about, I don't know, high 70s right now. It's pretty warm. So I'm just going to keep this out of direct sunlight, let it brew for a day or two. And then what I'll do is just decant it into my watering can, dilute it with some additional rainwater, and apply it to my garden. And then all the kind of chunky material in there at the bottom, I'll just dump that around the base of one of my trees. But anyway, let me know what you're doing to kick off the spring in your garden in the comments down below. And if you have some thoughts or some experience with worm tea or compost tea that you would like to share, I would always love to hear from you. So please leave me a comment about that as well. And happy gardening, everybody. I'll catch you next time.